Hey guys, this is Stuart of SBC Guitars and welcome to my tiniest of tiny workshops. Just before I start, apologies for any background noise. I'm currently in quite a rural area, but it's a surprisingly busy rural area. If you're new to my videos, I am a guitar builder, building guitars professionally for about 7 years. I have a workshop, very small but nicely kitted out workshop, and then last year I bought a boat with my partner so that we could go off and explore the country, and I've been building guitars on my tiny workshop space on the front of the boat. Yeah. So I wanted to do a video for you today just talking about neck profiles and the neck profiles that I personally prefer. I feel like it's one of those things that people obsess over the shape of a guitar, and I do some pretty wild shapes. I'm an ergonomic guitar builder. I kind of do it so I'll have an idea for a shape and I'll fit that with ergonomics that I like. And sometimes the idea will be more ergonomics led, sometimes the idea is maybe a little more aesthetically led. But even so, the aesthetic, the ergonomics are still a massive driving factor. But nobody ever generally considers the neck and how that affects the guitar. I mean, it affects the guitar in terms of how the neck actually hits the guitar, like the heel joint essentially, how we shape that, whether or not we want a big sort of shoulder for the heel joint to go into, whether or not we want it double cut, whether or not we want a bit more transfer of resonance, whether or not we want almost an unhindered access all the way up the neck. But that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about neck profiles. I do two main neck profiles. I'm just talking about my stock builds here, not my custom orders. Custom is different because I will do generally whatever people want, but I will also advise as well with custom orders. And these are my two preferred. This video isn't necessarily intended for other luthiers, I should say, although I will probably throw in a few hints at the end for people, for other luthiers, people looking at building their own guitars. What it is intended for is really for people looking at ordering a boutique guitar, or potentially just people who are interested in my thinking as a guitar builder and designer with a background in product design. Massive part of the reason why I build ergonomic guitars is I build guitars that are intended as both artistically interesting, but also guitars that are very comfortable to sit with and play for absolutely hours. The pinnacle of which is my Omicron guitar, which is a double cut, headless, well it's not actually headless, but generally most people have it headless. Headless guitar that sits beautifully comfortable however you want to sit it, has perfectly balanced weight, like materials regardless really, and is just a very versatile playable guitar. I do both of my favourite neck, I've done Omicrons in both the neck combinations that I'm going to talk about, and I think they work fantastically well. Now, I'm not talking about my actual models. What I'm talking about is neck profiles. So, the classic neck profile, in my opinion, is a D-shape neck. Everyone has their own terminology a little bit, I think. So I think there's kind of three neck shapes, largely. There's or four. There's sort of the D shape, which is, I think, maybe a little bit more classically Gibson, which is more of a shallow bowl. You have, I think SG is like the famous sort of D shape. You have the C shape, Again, other people might call these slightly different things. C shape is a bit more of a baseball bat almost, like it's a bit more continuously rounded. And often with a C shape, they round the fret ends over quite a bit as well, so it almost continues round like that. You have the V, which is I think a little bit more the classic Fender, which is a bit more that sort of shape. The shape that I tend to go with is a thin version of the classic D for a symmetric neck. So this would be, this isn't quite there, this is still something I'm working on, this is a headless bass, but this is going to have the classic D shape to it. So it's that shallow bowl shape. You've got the highest point is dead centre, which is why we call it a symmetric neck. So if you were to cut it in half, you'd have like the deepest point would be dead centre in the neck. And I tend to go for a thin, but not like Ibanez wizard neck, thin neck. The reason being is because, as I said before, I build my necks to be as comfortable as possible. A lot of guitarists, particularly session guitarists, over years and years of playing various different shapes and builds of guitars, will get back injuries, neck injuries. This is more due to weight and body shape. However, with hands, we also are quite prone to hand injuries. And depending on how you play a guitar will depend honestly on how the thickness of the neck works for you. A really thin neck is great, because what a really thin neck does is it puts your hand essentially, if I angle that so it looks like it's really thin, it puts your hand there and then gives your fingers loads of room to move around the neck. Particularly if you've got a very flat fretboard, which I do tend to do, it just, the speed at which you can play on that neck is phenomenal. But the problem I get is that my thumb is wanting to reach really far forwards to give my fingers that right position, and it's fine for shredding, but when it comes to doing like fretwork, I find I'm having to put extra pressure on with my thumb, and then I get this horrible ache in the palm of my hand. So for that reason, my go-to as a symmetric neck is like a medium thin, so it still has the ability to be a real shreddy guitar, but it's just a bit more comfortable on your hand. Now, my next neck, which is a little bit more avant-garde, is an asymmetric D. So I've drawn on here, so you've got your low E here and your high E here, and you can see the centre line is closer to the high E than the low E. So your thickest point is up here. This for me is the best of both worlds, between a really thin neck and a chunky, comfortable neck. So a chunky neck is great for like blues, chords, jazz, things like that, and a thin neck is great for playing fast. Yeah. This gives you a chunkier neck up here. So when you're doing chords, when you're doing rhythm, which in my opinion most musicians in bands, even lead guitarists, probably spend 3/4 of their time actually playing rhythm. You've got a really comfortable bass to hook your thumb onto and to play your guitar. Whereas when it comes to time to shred, you've got this lovely thinner, flatter point down here that you can get your thumb on and get all of that room for your fingers to move around. That, for me, the first time I made an asymmetric neck, it felt revolutionary. The other thing you can do with an asymmetric neck is you can flip it. So you can put the fat side on the bottom and the thin side at the top, and that is great for jazz and blues players, because it gives you, if you're a wraparound player, having the thin section there gives you so much room to wrap around, and gives you, like, if you're doing like fine little chords, it gives you the anchor point lower and it's a lovely comfortable neck, and I've specifically built them, a couple of them, for jazz guys that have struggled with RSI, repetitive strain injuries, in the past, and have had really positive feedback from them about how comfortable that neck is. Of course it's raining. I will say, as a luthier, if you're watching this, for a first build, I would advise against doing a asymmetric neck, because it can be a bit scary. And part of the reason for that is you should never build an asymmetric neck without it being reinforced. And if you're in the process of looking at ordering a guitar from a builder that isn't me, check with your builder that they are doing a reinforced neck. And I don't just mean a multi-part neck, I mean reinforced with carbon rod inserts, as well as a two-way truss rod, because that neck will twist. If it's not got reinforcement in it, it absolutely will twist. I know this because early days I built two. One had a 5-piece neck, one had a 7-piece neck. They both had really, nice, exotic, hard woods in them. I was using both quarter sawn, flat sawn and rift sawn bits so that the pull would be even, but didn't matter. They still, after about a year or two, they both twisted slightly, and you could feel how the action was much higher on the high strings than the low strings. You need to be really careful about that. I've never had a reinforced neck twist. Tools wise, there's no right tool for building an asymmetric or symmetric neck. It's just the right tool for you, for the job. In terms of actually getting the profile consistent though, I would really recommend, as a luthier, if you're watching this, get yourself a Shinto rasp if you don't have one already. They're really good. So like should have had this out ready, shouldn't I? Amateur hour. One of these. So a saw file, or a rasp, but it's a saw file, they call it. These are great. You can take the blades off, switch them around. They're not great. I wouldn't use them for like carving as such, so like carving specific shapes generally. But if you use a fine like rasp like this, get the shapes in both ends, you can then blend it together super quickly with this and have a really quite consistent profile. Do check your profile though, because it's a little bit of a bugbear of mine when I look at other guitars and you see that they're like thick as you like here, really thin here, and then even thinner here. It needs to be an even profile. I know some people will prefer to have the same thickness here as here. Personally, I'd rather have it thinner here and a bit thicker here, but it needs to be even. It feels very amateur if it's not. The other thing, finally, I would say, is check for shoulders. So I like doing a volute. Part of the reason why I like doing a volute is I feel like, as well as a nice luxury item, I feel like it gives me control to carve that volute and to know where the neck profile has to go to. And if it's got shoulders, that generally takes it out. So what do I mean by shoulders? All I mean is where there's just like a sharp corner where somebody hasn't taken the neck profile all the way into the headstock, and you can just feel these lumps. I can feel one on here slightly because this still needs a bit of work, and that's one of those things that sort of bugs me, and it lets down what is often otherwise a very nice guitar. I'm gonna stop there and leave it there. If this is out in time, I've got the Coventry guitar show coming up that I'm doing with the Boutique Guitar Collective, which is on the 15th of October and should be a lot of fun. We've got a lovely range of folks there, including a couple of amp builders for the first time, and an acoustic builder for the first time. So you can come and chat with me about neck profiles there and tell me how wrong I am about everything that I've ever learned ever. That would be good. And otherwise, please do drop me a message, chat with me below, and I will see you next time, probably in some amount of time. Bye.